I never thought letting my brother's ex crash at my place would lead to this, but that night when I found her on the kitchen floor crying in the dark, everything changed, and what happened after I still haven't been able to forget it. It had been a quiet few weeks, the kind where the days blend together, where nothing dramatic happens, and you're grateful for it. My apartment was my safe space, clean, calm mine after years of chaos, bad roommates, and breakups that left me with more questions then closure. I finally had my own rhythm, mornings with coffee on the fire, escape, late night movies half watched under a blanket, everything in its place exactly how I liked it. So when my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months, I almost didn't answer. Leah. The last time I saw that name on my screen, it was followed by my brother's voice swearing she was the one. That was a year ago, back when they were still posting vacation photos, and she was showing up at family dinners and soft sweaters and lip gloss that caught the light when she laughed. We hadn't spoken since the breakup. I didn't even know if she still lived in the city, but there she was, her message short and to the point. Hey, I know this is random, but is there any chance I could crash at your place for a bit, just a few nights? I'm in between places, long story, I'd owe you big time. I stared at the message for a long time. Everything in me screamed that it was a bad idea, that it would be awkward, complicated, potentially explosive, but what I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest friends, was that I had always felt something for Leah, even when she was dating my brother. Especially then, I kept it buried. Of course, I was supportive, polite, distant when I needed to be. I never let myself get too close, but I remembered every detail, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the raspy undertone in her voice when she was tired, the way she looked at people like she saw through them. There was something magnetic about her, and I hated how easily I remembered it now. Still, I typed back, yeah, just a few nights though. And that was how everything started when she showed up at my door the next evening, suitcase in hand, hair pulled up in a messy bun. I felt my pulse spike instantly. She looked exactly the same, maybe a little more worn around the edges, a little less polished, but still beautiful, effortlessly, irritatingly beautiful. Hey, she said softly, giving me a nervous smile. Hey, I echoed, stepping aside to let her in. She wheeled her bag inside and looked around like she wasn't sure if she belonged here. Thanks again. I really didn't know who else to call. It's fine, I said too quickly. Really, it's not a big deal. But it was the first few hours were polite, stiff, even. We talked about logistics, how long she needed to stay, where she could put her things, how we'd share the space. She offered to sleep on the couch, and I said it was fine as long as she didn't steal my throw blanket. She laughed at that, and for a split second, it felt like old times, whatever that even meant. We danced around the obvious. No mention of my brother. No questions about why she had nowhere else to go. She said she was in between places, but I could see in her eyes there was more to the story. I didn't press. Not yet. That night, we sat across from each other on the couch, both pretending to be engrossed in some random Netflix show while stealing glances when we thought the other wasn't looking. The tension wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, lingering like a song stuck on repeat at the edge of your mind. I remembered a time during their relationship when Leah and I ended up sitting next to each other at a family BBQ. My brother was off talking to some old friend, and we started talking about nothing in particular, music, books, how weirdly cold it was for May. But somewhere in the middle of that conversation, she turned to me and said, "You're easy to talk to, you know that?" And I felt it, that shift. That moment of recognition. I told myself it meant nothing. I buried it like I buried everything else I wasn't supposed to feel. And now here she was sleeping under my roof. We kept things casual. The next day she made coffee before I woke up and left me a post-it with a smiley face and "Hope you like strong coffee." We didn't talk much, but there was something easy about the way we moved around each other, familiar but not familiar enough. And every time she leaned over the counter or brushed her hair back behind her ear or looked at me just a second too long, I felt it again, that pull, that wrong but right feeling I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge back then. We weren't just two people sharing a space, we were two people with history, with tension, with something unspoken burning just beneath the surface, and I knew it wouldn't stay buried forever. I thought I was helping her out, but deep down I already knew this was a mistake I was going to feel everywhere. For the first couple of days we were polite strangers sharing a space with a shared past we didn't talk about, but by the end of the first week that started to change slowly in the small ways that only happen when two people begin to ease into each other's orbit. Leah started cooking, not full meals, not yet, but little things, scrambled eggs in the morning, toasted sandwiches in the afternoon. It wasn't until the third time she made dinner that I realized she remembered I hated onions and always left them out. "You always pick them out of your food," she said one night with a soft smirk, not even looking at me, as she stirred a pan on the stove. I remember the way she said it made something tighten in my chest. In return, I started leaving post-it notes, dumb little things, coffee strong today, Don't blame me, don't eat the last cookie, I'm serious, you're still here, so I guess it's not so bad. She started replying, it was a terrible cookie, I saved you from disappointment, your coffee is always strong, maybe I like it, I'm still here. Wonder why we never said the things we were actually thinking, but we kept finding new ways to say everything else. It was subtle, but the space between us kept shrinking. We started sitting closer when we ate, walking in step when we went out for groceries, watching shows on the couch together without realizing how our legs kept brushing beneath the blanket. It was all so casual, so quiet, but I felt it every time. I started noticing Leah's habits in ways I hadn't before, how she always walked around barefoot even in the cold, her toes curled against the floor like she needed to feel grounded, the way she hummed absently while she brushed her teeth, the scent she carried after her showers, something clean and floral that always lingered in the hallway long after she passed by. She laughed more now, not always, but sometimes, and every time she did, I felt it, that warmth, that lightness, like I was hearing something I hadn't realized I'd missed. Her laugh wasn't just sound, it was comfort, and I hated that it made me want her more. One evening we sat on the floor eating pasta out of mismatched bowls, our knees bumping occasionally as we watched something stupid and overdramatic on TV. She'd just gotten out of the shower, her hair still damp, curling slightly around her face. She wore one of my hoodies like it was nothing, like it belonged to her, and maybe it did at one point. She paused the episode, looked over at me, and said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. Did you ever think he and I didn't make sense? The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't have an aunt, but because I didn't know how honest I was allowed to be. I didn't really let myself think about it. I said carefully. Leah smiled like she knew that was a lie, but wasn't going to call me out on it. We were never right, she said quietly, staring down at her bowl. He was sweet in the beginning, really sweet, but I think we both wanted different things. I stayed longer than I should have, hoping I'd feel something I never did. I set my food down, appetite gone. Why are you telling me this? She looked up at me, then eyes clear, voice soft, because I think I felt more seen by you in 5 minutes than I did in 5 months with him, and that scares the hell out of me. The air between us changed after that. We didn't talk about it again, not directly, but something cracked open between us and neither of us moved to close it. Later that night we sat on the couch, watching something forgettable. We shared a blanket, our bodies too close, but neither of us shifted away. Her thigh pressed lightly against mine, our arms brushed. When we both reached for the popcorn bowl at the same time, my skin burned where hers touched mine, and I wondered if she could feel it too. Then, as the episode played on and the apartment grew quieter, she shifted just slightly. Her hand grazed mine. At first, I thought it was an accident, but when I didn't move, neither did she. We sat like that for a long time, still breathing carefully, hearts too loud in our chests, and then she leaned her head on my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't want to. I think she knew, but that was just the beginning. Living with Leah started to feel less like a favor and more like a habit I never wanted to break. She slipped into my space so seamlessly, so naturally, that I often caught myself forgetting this wasn't how things were supposed to be. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be in my kitchen, in my bathroom, lounging on my couch in my hoodie, acting like this wasn't rewriting the way I saw every corner of my apartment and her. But that's what started happening. We moved around each other like people who'd always known the layout of each other's bodies, how to slip past without brushing shoulders, when to move over on the couch before the other said anything. We shared space like it was instinct, and yet there were moments, little ones, that made my skin heat and my chest tighten because we didn't always move away in time. Sometimes we touched, sometimes it lingered, sometimes it felt like she kissed me again, this time firmer. Her hands moved down, gripping the hem of my shirt, pulling it up slowly, eyes asking for something unspoken. I nodded. We moved through it like a storm that had waited too long to break. Her sweater fell off her shoulders. My shirt lifted over my head. Our skin met in gasps and shivers, and the tension that had sat between us for weeks, maybe longer, dissolved in the heat. She pushed me back gently, laying me down on the cool tile. Her lips trailed down my neck, slow and aching, like she was learning every part of me with her mouth. My back arched beneath her and I tugged her closer, needing more, needing her. She whispered things I couldn't remember but felt in my bones. Her hands were everywhere, soft then firmer, guiding, searching. My fingers traced her spine. My legs wrapped around her waist. Every second bled into the next. No beginning, no end, just heat, movement, surrender. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real and raw. It was her crying into my shoulder one moment and biting her lip the next. It was me whispering, "I've wanted you." like it was a confession, and her pulling me closer like she'd been dying to hear it. Time blurred, breathless kisses, fingertips tracing trembling skin, her body pressed against mine, moving with mine, both of us giving into something we didn't know how to name, only that it was honest. And when it was over, when we were tangled on the floor in a sweaty, trembling heap, hearts racing, mouths still tasting one another, she didn't look away. She rested her forehead against mine, eyes wide bare. Her thumb stroked my jaw like she was afraid I'd disappear. I touched her face gently, like I was still trying to convince myself she was really here, that this had really happened. And when I looked at her after, everything was different. And she didn't look away, so I knew at that time this was not a mistake. Morning crept in like a slow confession, soft light painting shadows across the kitchen floor, wrapping everything in an eerie kind of calm. I stirred first, still on the ground, my cheek pressed against the cool tile, my limbs tangled in warmth that wasn't just mine. Leah, she was curled against me, head resting on my shoulder, one arm draped across my stomach like she'd clung to me in her sleep. Her breath was steady, slower than mine, her fingers twitching slightly in the early haze. I lay there in silence, unmoving, eyes open and completely unsure of what to do with the weight pressing against my ribs. Not just her, not just what we'd done, everything. We hadn't said a word after we just collapsed into each other, skin flushed and breathless, like two people who had spent years pretending they didn't want to crash into one another. And now, in the quiet light of morning, the impact was undeniable. She stirred slowly beside me, blinking into the muted brightness. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, just a moment, it was there again. That soft electricity, that naked honesty. No fear, no pretense. But then she blinked again, and I saw it begin to shift. Her face softened into something cautious and certain. "Hey," she whispered, voice still from sleep. "Hey," I whispered back, and then silence. We didn't move, we didn't entangle ourselves, but we didn't speak either. There was too much between us, and none of it knew where to land. Eventually, she pulled back just slightly, sitting up, running a hand through her hair as she glanced around the kitchen like she was looking for something, an excuse, maybe an out, a moment to rewind. "I should make coffee," she said, not quite looking at me. I sat up too, wrapping my arms around my knees, the cold suddenly sharper than it had been seconds ago. "Yeah, coffee sounds good." We moved quietly. She found a sweatshirt to throw over her bare shoulders. I grabbed two mugs. Neither of us spoke while the machine gurgled and hissed, filling the room with the familiar smell of comfort and avoidance. But the silence wasn't comfortable anymore. We were pretending again, and it hurts. We sat across from each other at the table, fingers wrapped around warm ceramic, pretending to scroll through our phones, pretending we weren't aching in the silence. Everything had changed, and neither one of us knew what to do with it. Guilt pulls beneath my skin like a bruise that hadn't fully formed yet. My brother's name hovered in the back of my mind like a ghost, reminding me that what happened last night, what we'd finally let ourselves feel, wasn't supposed to exist. Not with her. But pretending it hadn't happened felt worse because every part of it was real. I looked up at her. She was biting her thumbnail, staring out the window, like it held the answers we both didn't have. And then suddenly she spoke. "I know I wasn't supposed to want you," she said softly, her voice barely above the hum of the fridge. "But I did. I did." My breath caught. She set her mug down and finally met my eyes. I tried to fight it. "God, I did. But every time you looked at me, every time you laughed, every time you left the room, and I wanted you to come back, none of it felt wrong, not in the way it should have. I felt something crumble and rebuild inside me all at once. I spent months trying not to think about you, vowed," I said, "even when you were with him, especially when you were with him. And after the breakup, I told myself you were off limits, that it was just leftover feelings, some stupid, unresolved thing I'd never get to understand." I paused, swallowing the knot in my throat. "But then you moved in, and it wasn't leftover, it wasn't fading, it was you, and I never stopped thinking about you." She looked like she might cry again, but not from sadness, from the unbearable weight of knowing we were both finally telling the truth. "I don't want to ruin your memories," she said, "of him, of what we were. I don't want this to be something that makes you question who I was back then. You don't have to justify anything," I said, reaching across the table and laying my hand gently over hers. "I already questioned it, all of it. But not you. I never questioned you." Our fingers curled together, slowly, tightly. "So what now?" she asked. I exhaled long and deep. "We can't pretend it didn't happen. But we also can't pretend it's casual. Not if it's going to keep happening." Her eyes searched mine. Do you want it to keep happening? Yes, I said without hesitation, but not like last night, not hidden, not scared. A pause, then she nodded. If we do this, it has to be honest, real. No more halfway feelings, I added. No more pretending we're just roommates. She smiled faintly, brushing her thumb along the side of my hand. That might be harder than it sounds, I laughed under my breath. Yeah, well, nothing about this has been easy. We sat in the quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full of something new, something we hadn't dared named before, but finally knew how to feel out loud. Later that day, we didn't talk about labels, we didn't make promises, but there were moments. Leah brushed past me in the hallway, her fingers trailing along my side, me catching her, smiling when she thought I wasn't looking. Shared glances, shared breaths. That night, she knocked gently on my bedroom door. I opened it, already knowing she didn't ask to come in. She just did. She crawled into bed beside me and laid her head on my chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. My arm wrapped around her shoulders. Her fingers laced mine under the blanket. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. We'd already said everything. And as we lay there in the dark, our hearts beating slow and steady beside each other, I realized something. I didn't know what we were. I didn't know what name this would take, or how we'd explain it to anyone else. I didn't even know if we were ready for what it meant, but I knew this. This wasn't a mistake. This was the beginning of something I should have been brave enough to feel a long time ago. And I'm not letting her go this time. I didn't plan on falling for her. She was supposed to be temporary, just a guest, just my brother's ex. But then she looked at me like I mattered, really mattered. And everything I'd buried for years came rushing to the surface. What happened between us wasn't casual. It wasn't planned, but it was real. And now I don't know what we are. I don't even know if we're ready to say it out loud, but I know what I felt. I know what she felt, and I'm not pretending anymore. Would you have let her in, or would you have taken the risk? Let me know in the comments. Because I think deep down we both knew this wasn't just a second chance. This was the beginning. Did it on purpose. It wasn't just the physical space that blurred. It was everything. Conversations that stretched to long into the night. Glances that said too much. Laughs that felt like old memories, even though we were making them in real time. She made me forget that this had once been complicated. That she used to be someone else's. That she was someone I was never supposed to want. And she didn't act like she didn't know. There was a moment one morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee. Half asleep, wearing nothing but a sleep shirt and socks. Leah walked in with a bed head and sleepy eyes, yawning, her shirt sliding off one shoulder. She paused in the doorway, leaned on the frame, and said with a smirk, "You look dangerously domestic right now." I turned, eyebrows raised. Dangerous? She grinned and moved past me, reaching for a mug, like the kind of girl someone could accidentally fall for if they're not careful. I laughed, because what else could I do? But her eyes didn't move away from mine for a long time. Not until I broke the moment first. Later that day, I told myself it didn't mean anything. That it was just harmless flirting. That Leah had always been playful, even when she was with my brother. But I didn't believe that anymore. Not when her hand brushed mine again that night. Not when her towel slipped just slightly too low when she walked out of the bathroom. Not when her fingers lingered too long on my back when I moved past her in the hallway. I started having dreams. Real ones, vivid, her mouth on mine, her breath against my skin, the sound of her voice saying my name like it meant something. I'd wake up tangled in sheets, breathless, skin hot with a longing I didn't know where to place, and seeing her the next morning, smirking, glowing, barefoot and casual, didn't make it any easier to forget. I avoided mirrors for a while. I didn't want to look at myself and see guilt, or worse, hope. But it wasn't just me, and I knew it. She'd sit on the couch with her legs resting over mine, laugh at my stupid jokes, bring home snacks she knew I liked. Her playlist started sounding like mine. My shampoo started smelling like her. We were bleeding into each other, slowly, in a way that felt dangerous, but also inevitable. One night, after dinner and 2 glasses of wine too many, we were sitting on the floor again, the couch behind us, a movie playing quietly in the background. Neither of us was really watching. The room was dim, lit only by the flicker of a single candle. Leah had lit earlier, claiming she liked the way it smelled, like vanilla and something vaguely nostalgic. She had her knees tucked to her chest, wine glass cradled loosely between her fingers. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, tendrils falling around her face. Her eyes were soft, distant. Did you ever wonder, she asked, what it would have been like if we had met differently? I looked over, the question landing like a weight in my chest. What do you mean, if I hadn't been with your brother? If I was just some girl you met at a bookstore or a friend's party, would we have talked? Would we have ended up here anyway? I stared at her, trying not to let my heart show through the cracks in my voice. Yeah, I think we would have. She turned to look at me, and there was something raw in her eyes. Sometimes I wish we had. We held that look for a long time. My hand moved before I could stop it, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. If anything, she leaned into the touch. My fingers stayed there, lightly grazing the line of her jaw, tracing the heat I felt just beneath her skin. Her eyes fluttered closed. I leaned in so slow it felt like time had gone still. Her lips parted, her breath caught. I could feel the space between us getting smaller with every passing heartbeat. But just before we met, she pulled back. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't even a full retreat. Just a pause. A heartbreakingly careful pause. She inhaled sharply, set her glass down, and stood up in one slow movement. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have said that, Leah, I said quietly, but I didn't know what I was going to say next. She wouldn't meet my eye. Her hands were fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, her lip caught between her teeth like she was holding something back that was too big to name. It's not that I don't, she started, then stopped. It's just complicated. I know, I said, swallowing the ache in my chest. You don't have to explain. She looked at me, then really looked, and in her eyes was everything she wasn't saying. The fear, the confusion, the want. She stood there for a second, like she wanted to say something else, like she might still close the distance. But instead she let the silence wrap around us one last time, and whispered good night, before walking down the hallway and disappearing into the spare room. The soft click of the door echoed louder than it should have, but the way she looked at me before she turned away, that wasn't nothing. I didn't mean to wake up. 1 second, I was asleep, tangled in a dream I couldn't remember. And the next, I was staring at the ceiling in the dark, my chest tight, my room too quiet. Something felt off, heavy, like the air had shifted, like there was something waiting just outside my door. The apartment was still, but I noticed the faintest light leaking from under the kitchen door, a soft glow, almost like a whisper calling me. I pushed off the covers, stepped into the hall barefoot and unsure why my heart was already beating faster, and then I saw her. Leah was sitting on the kitchen floor, her back against the cabinet, knees drawn to her chest, her face crumpled into her hands. Her shoulders shook in quiet waves, and for a moment I just stood there, stunned, frozen, because this wasn't the Leah I knew, not the teasing, playful version, not even the guarded one. This was the raw version, bare and unfiltered, breaking in real time. Leah, I said, soft and careful, like I was approaching something fragile. She looked up. Her eyes were red and glassy, her cheeks wet. Sorry, she croaked, laughing bitterly through her tears. I didn't mean to wake you. I walked toward her without thinking and dropped to the floor beside her, knees bent, arm brushing hers. You didn't, I whispered. I couldn't sleep. She didn't say anything at first, just stared ahead at the fridge like it had answers. I feel like I'm drowning, she finally said, all the time, even when I'm around you. Maybe especially then, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing anymore. My chest tightened. Is it about him? She laughed again, softer this time. Tired, that's the thing. It's not, or maybe it used to be. I don't know, but I've been thinking about it. Us, me and your brother, and I realized something tonight. I turned my head to look at her. Her eyes were glossy, her face streaked with emotion, but her voice was a steadier, now quieter, honest. I don't think I ever really loved him, she said, not the way I wanted to love someone, not in the way that last I tried to convince myself I did. I told everyone I did, but it wasn't this. Her voice cracked. It wasn't what I felt when I looked at you. I stopped breathing. She sniffed and wiped at her face with the sleeve of her oversized sweater, avoiding my eyes. I know it's messed up. I know how this looks, and I've been trying not to say it because I didn't want to ruin anything. But pretending hasn't made it go away. It's just made everything harder. I reached out slowly and touched her hand, just one finger, lightly over hers. Her fingers flinched, then curled around mine like they'd been waiting for permission. I felt it too, I said softly. Since the beginning, I just didn't know if I was allowed to. Our hands stayed together, resting between us on the cool tile. Her thumb brushed the side of mine slowly, like a silent thank you, like a plea not to let go. She looked over at me finally, and when her eyes met there was no more pretending. I leaned. In first tentative searching, I saw. The moment her lips parted, the moment her breath caught, she didn't pull away. Our lips met, soft, trembling. Her mouth was warm, hesitant, her hands squeezing mine just a little tighter as she leaned in and kissed me, like she wasn't sure she deserved to. I felt the apology in it, the fear, the hunger, and I kissed her back, like I wanted to take all of that away. It deepened slowly, one breath, one press of our mouths at a time. Her hand slid into my hair, mine curled into her shirt, and everything we hadn't said spilled out in every soft gasp, every low moan, every desperate, honest touch. She shifted, crawling into my lap without a word, her thighs straddling mine, her chest pressed to mine, and I felt it. Her need, her trembling, our foreheads rested together, breathing hard, and I whispered her name. Leah. She